In this episode,
I don't think any installer goes out thinking, I'm going to do a crap job.
what exactly is their role in the industry?
God knows.
They seem to think that complexity makes things better. And
Every 19 seconds, a gas boiler goes in the UK.
Our average is about 7.4 days per install.
Gas boilers, if you can competently make it not explode and kill people, generally the rest of it's fine.
Hi and welcome to another episode of Homeowners Q&A. I'm your host Mars, and today we're not only looking back at the key successes and challenges of 2024, but we're also looking ahead to what the future holds in the world of heat pumps in the UK. Joining me for this exciting conversation is an exceptional panel of guests. We've got Patrick Wheeler from Vito Energy, Max Waddingham from Good Energy, Brendon Uys from British Gas Net Zero, and Graham Hendra, heat pump champion and enthusiast. Welcome everybody. So over the course of the last 6 years since we've had a heat pump, I've been kind of monitoring what the general consensus is among homeowners. And what I found really interesting is that 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of questions when we'd get contacted by homeowners saying, do heat pumps genuinely work? And over the course of the last 18 months, I have found that question has evolved now. We don't get asked that, do heat pumps work? I think a lot of people are accepting that they do, but they understand that when they don't work properly, it's because they've been installed poorly. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of very badly installed heat pumps in the UK. So Brendon, get us going today. Tell us why we still have so many poorly installed heat pumps in the UK, and is it going to change kind of going ahead into 2025 and beyond?
the biggest problem is the technology. Heat pumps are a very unforgiving technology. They're not nearly as forgiving as a gas boiler or any form of fossil fuel system. On a fossil fuel system, we're changing the phase of energy. What we're doing is we are taking potential energy in the form of oil, gas, coal, could be anything, and we're burning it to change the state of that energy into heat. The more heat we need, we just put more fuel in there and it produces it. It's a relatively simple process and a relatively simple procedure. A heat pump, we're actually moving heat. We're taking heat from one place and putting it to another place. And you have a certain capacity to do that with the equipment you've got. That's where the problem comes in. And because they are so expensive, they're generally sized to the requirement they've got to meet. So if you try and treat a heat pump like a gas boiler, it will generally punish you by not performing well. Just a different heat source, and it's got to be treated differently.
So Patrick, you guys obviously have got a great track record of installing heat pumps. So why is it that you guys can utilize, this very different technology that runs very differently, but, have successful installations time and time again?
Probably make less money. Probably charging the same amount because there's a market rate. We try harder, we train our engineers more, we've got more regimented processes, we spend more time and effort, and we care about the result we're giving to the customers, which means that compared to the competitors that we're looking at, we're probably making less money, right? I'm not prepared to leave a legacy where we're not doing the best thing we possibly can. We go the extra mile for the customers to make sure that they get a really good end result, which overall, their life cycle of the machine will be less costly to the customer because we've done the right thing and we've tailored it and we've made it run on weather compensation on an open loop and got it running really nicely. But that means that we're in competition with people that haven't got very much experience, haven't had extra training, don't go the extra mile, and therefore probably make a bit more money. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's very difficult to choose an installer that's going to do the right thing for you, isn't it? There's no real benchmark. Being MCS regulated or accredited isn't a sign of quality, it's a sign of compliance. There needs to be more and more for the customers to be able to benchmark what the actual quality is that they're going to get from an installer. Brendon's completely right that, we can't treat heat pumps like we treat gas boilers. Gas boilers, if you can competently make it not explode and kill people, generally the rest of it's fine. They don't care. Gas is cheap and it always works and always gets the house warm. Even if you oversize it by a factor of 10, which is common, it'll still warm up, it'll cycle its nuts off, but it'll still work and the house will be warm and the customer never calls you back. We need a dramatic shift towards training and understanding for the people that are transitioning from gas.
So why are there just so many ill-equipped and not particularly well-trained installers in the UK, Max?
That's a good question. Yeah, we certainly found it difficult when we are hiring new engineers. It's very difficult to find ready-to-roll air source heat pump installation engineers out there, because those guys that are trained are either working for themselves or working for, great companies like Vito Energy, doing right by the customer. Those that do think it's an easy route in maybe lead to some of these worst performing installs that we speak about. Certainly what we've had the past few years, I mean, you've seen hydrogens hanging around. Some of the manufacturers have been lobbying against heat pumps and then for heat pumps. It's not been, in my opinion, from an installer's point of view, a certainty of what direction heating's going in the future. Certainly for those of us that are informed and know about heat pumps, there's only one real outcome for the future of heating for the majority of houses for the country. For those looking at what does the future look like for me as an installer, it's not been very clear, and I think as a result there's been a bit of reluctance to maybe take time out of work to go and do training on this future technology. We've seen funding there from the government for level 3 heat pump courses and things like that, but even those, they're a couple of days. You can't learn everything you need to know about heat pumps. To go back to what Brendon said at the start of the call there, it's very different to a boiler. You can't mask problems by turning a temperature switch up. Yeah, I think it's the certainty of direction of travel has been missing. We've seen that come on board a bit more recently with, extension of boiler upgrade scheme. We're revisiting the clean heat market mechanism in the new year. The direction of travel has been picked up again, and hopefully that brings more people to the industry. But from an installer point of view, it is an up and coming industry, so there just isn't the workforce there at the minute to deal with the demand that is growing and growing year on year. And as a result, we probably see people getting into the market that haven't had the adequate training, or the companies that may be in there to make a quick buck but not investing the time in getting the installers up to speed. You want to be making profit as soon as possible. Adequate training might be an easy way to cut costs there. As the market grows, there'll be more and more adequately trained and competent workforce in there to start getting these installations in performing well.
Graham, should we be curbing the amounts of these heat pumps that are getting slapped in then? Because surely this is doing more damage than good. I mean, at the end of the day, I think I saw that MCS had posted that there had been 50,000 heat pumps installed this year, which I think is the highest amount of installations in 1 year. Should we not be maybe slowing down the installations, training up those installers so that heat pumps are getting put in properly? Because I'm beginning to see a problem that could potentially emerge kind of 5-10 years down the line, where we've slapped in a couple of 100,000 heat pumps that are going to have to get changed or upgraded or retrofitted to actually work the way they should have today.
I don't think we should restrict it. I mean, I don't see it as any different from any other trade. So, example, I would like someone to come round and paint my lounge. Now, if I get a good guy round or good lady round, they do a really lovely job and my lounge looks amazing. If I get an animal around, it'll be cheap. It will look awful, my wife will go berserk, and I'll ring Dulux up and complain that the paint they provided to me was crap. What I'm saying is it's about pride. I mean, clearly Patrick's company and Max's company and Brendon's company, they have pride, these guys. Maybe they don't make so much money, but they don't want to leave you in the lurch. I expect, probably driven by a similar thing to me, which is a fear of being shouted at by people who used to be customers. I don't think any installer goes out thinking, I'm going to do a crap job. I think that they all go out going, I'm going to do the best I can, but their best might be not a level that's acceptable to you. And I just don't see how you can police that in any trade. Picking up on something Brendon says, I completely agree. As far as I'm concerned, there isn't a heat pump out there that helps you install it. The machines are overcomplicated. They are all rubbish. Every single one of them.
Absolutely correct.
We've talked about this off camera, Mars, and the machine doesn't give you any help. When I put it in, why doesn't the machine say, blimey, I'm using a lot of energy, or blimey, this is a very high temperature for a day when it's warm outside? And I think that hopefully is what we're going to see in the future, is units with a little bit more intelligence and so on. The last few weeks I've been looking at controls in heat pumps just because I've got nothing better to do. And there's a little man appears on the screen, a picture of a snowman. And I said to two different companies, what does the snowman mean? One said, the snowman's there because we're cooling. And one says the snowman's there because we're heating because there's a snowman in the garden. And I went, how does the poor engineer work this out? And I said, here's an idea, lads. We could put on the screen the heating is on. They all looked at me like I had two heads. So my aim for 2025 is somebody's actually going to produce the world's first heat pump controller that actually speaks to you in language you can understand and help the installer. So I think we're training the wrong people. We need to train the developers, not the installers.
My view is that if Elon Musk can make a car drive by itself, the might of the air conditioning industry should be able to make a heat pump drive by itself. And it's actually not that difficult. And I totally agree, Graham. I have produced a controller that actually talks to you, but I showed it to the manufacturers and they didn't want it because you know why.
Can I ask a slightly different question? I was being very rude and doing some maths while the other guys were talking. I was thinking about this as I was having my lunch. I'm just finishing my 15th year in heat pumps, and I've got a feeling I might have been wasting my time. So when I started, no one put heat pumps in. And looking at the numbers, nobody puts heat pumps in. I'll just put that into figures for you. Every 19 seconds, a gas boiler goes in the UK. Every 7 minutes, a heat pump goes in. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job. The smart money says that the figures this year will be around 75,000, 1.7 million boilers. Either we're all rubbish, or maybe the technology isn't right, or the consumer. But no one in our industry can turn around and say, we have convinced the general public that heat pumps are the way to heat your house. The figures just don't say that. Maybe we should look at it as a bigger picture. You know, why aren't people buying them?
They're scared that they aren't going to work because so many of them don't work. And that is the reality of the heat pump industry, unfortunately. There are a huge amount that do work, but you never hear about those. You very rarely hear about the heat pumps that do work. It's all the ones that don't work. And unfortunately, there are far too many out there.
Gas is also a very established part of the industry, isn't it? It's very easy. The engineers can still make really good money with not very much training or experience. As an early 20-something-year-old, you can go and earn 40, 45 grand a year putting in gas boilers without any training or diligence. It is a big uphill struggle at the moment. I think one of the biggest things that would change, I mean, the clean heat market mechanism coming in is a good idea. Sure, it's a nice idea. They've watered it down quite a lot, but at least it'll be another small catalyst. But what's the incentive for the gas engineers to stop fitting gas boilers when they're much easier? You can do it much quicker. It's less heavy, so it's less strenuous. The problems that you get from it are low. Where's the incentive for them? There's very few engineers that want to make that transition at the moment. And the clean heat market mechanism being it's a penalty, isn't it? Really, it's a stick again rather than a carrot. That's going to push more people to transition, probably, or at least the manufacturers to try and facilitate it. I guess eventually we'll see, again through penalties, that the gas market will be more competitive and therefore they'll make maybe a little bit less money. That's what's going to galvanize the engineers into moving, is security of their job and their position.
I mean, I'll jump onto your point, Graham, about the speed of which these things are installed. So, I mean, I don't know how long it takes a boiler to actually get put in if you were just to go into a house and do a retrofit of a property. But it was really interesting because I've been speaking to a new installer that's become quite active on our forums. But they're a boiler a boiler installer, and they're now segueing into air source heat pumps. So they've been doing it for a while. And their approach to it almost sounds to what Patrick says about, making less money. They're taking a lot longer to fit these air source heat pumps in. And the thing that really surprised me is he said that for 2025, they're planning to put in 35 heat pumps as a business. And I just thought, 35, that's, there's 50 odd weeks in a year. That's not even one a week because they're giving themselves so much time. So you are going to have to sacrifice making money to actually put these things in properly. Do you think that that's part of the problem, Max?
Yeah, to an extent. It can be a very, very intrusive install. What goes on with a boiler? Generally speaking, if your boiler breaks, you phone up somebody to come replace that boiler. They'll look, it's a 30 kilowatt boiler on the wall. Let's take that off. Let's put the same boiler back on. There's no heat loss. There's no design kind of work around it. You're not dictated to about what your contract packs must look like and how your sales process must be. So you can just go up, almost on a handshake and an invoice, get the boiler out of the van, chuck it in, done and dusted the same day you've been called. Heat pumps, you are told how you sell it. You're told how you maintain it. You're told how you sell it to the customer, how you warrant it, how you guarantee it, and that's before you even get to site, at which point you've then got to upgrade not just the heating appliance, but generally speaking, the entire heating system, radiators, whatever it might be, because you are aiming to get the system as efficient as possible. So that means changing the heating system, not just the appliance. Again, someone's chucking a new boiler in, they're not looking at how can I make this as efficient as possible? We should change all these radiators and get that temperature down. They don't have to, therefore they don't. When you add all that together, it means the installations become very long. I think our average is about 7.4 days per install because we look for more complex jobs. And by more complex, we basically mean we need to do more with the job, as in change radiators and things like that. In theory, new builds that are coming through that have been designed to 55 degrees and below, as per the building regulations, are going to be very easy to swap for a heat pump. My mum's got a new build, a year old. We put that boiler down to 55 degrees. That house is not warm enough. When we called the builder about it, they just came in and said, oh yeah, that's why I turned the temperature up of the boiler. And that was their fix. So that can is being kicked down the road. But it's for that reason that heat pumps are so much more complex to install, to deal with, because we're told how to do it. And we have a lot of barriers. You know, we've not even spoke about DNO, planning reasons, things like that. All these things that boilers don't have to compete with. We talk about heat pumps being very expensive to customers. That labour has to be paid for. You can't go and do 5 days of the 7-day job for free. Therefore, it pushes the price up. All these kind of factors snowball in and make heat pumps seem like a very expensive, pricey technology. What I always like to say to customers is 20 years down the line, when you need a new heat pump, you're not going to have to replace all these radiators and things again like you've done this time. It's going to be an appliance swap. But very few houses are at that stage at the minute. So we are having to replace a lot of the system, cylinders and everything.
Quite often what we say to customers is, in a lot of cases, we're replacing radiators and pipework that's been there for a generation. It's not really suitable for a condensing boiler either. We're just forcing the condensing boiler to run in a way that suits the aging system. This does seem utterly bonkers, but probably quite telling that boilers which have the potential to be life-threatening or building-threatening, if they really went wrong, if there was a significant gas leak that then exploded, it can blow up buildings, it can certainly hurt people. And there's less compliance and less onus put onto the installer to ensure that it's been done correctly and that the person doing it is competent and has done it safely than there is for fitting an air source heat pump, because that's got a government grant. So the money's more important than the safety. There should be a hell of a lot more regulation over something that's capable of killing someone. But for gas, it's ridiculous. The colleges have 100% pass rates as adverts in the trade mags. You go there and there can be people that don't even speak English that can get the qualification. And I saw someone doing a spillage test on a hob, which basically means they filled the whole course centre with smoke, and they still passed. And we have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to release money from the government to incentivise the uptake of renewables, whereas the gas industry has managed to engineer itself into a position where they can just slap a boiler on the wall, and as long as you've got that ticket, then there's nothing that happens after it. So tighter regulation on gas will definitely help even the playing field a bit.
Planning to install an air source heat pump? Then get your copy of Bodge Buster. It's packed with must-ask questions, real homeowner insights, and a practical guide for a smoother installation. Available in print and on Kindle. Link in the description. What lessons from 2024 do you think that installers and manufacturers should carry through into 2025 or perhaps improve on?
I think the controls are the place that we could best make some improvement. Like we were talking about earlier, making it a simple control that says what it's doing, rather than I was trying to troubleshoot a system that we didn't fit, that's a Mitsubishi system that's also got some Horstman controller that's overriding the inbuilt weather compensation. Trying to help troubleshoot it over WhatsApp because we didn't have an engineer to send out to him. And I couldn't make head or tail of it. And I don't know how it was wired up, but I was trying to talk him through it and it was utterly bonkers. Even if it was just the Mitzi unit, it would probably be almost impossible because it's got several different symbols telling you what it might do, and some words that don't really pertain to what you expect in heating. And really you want it to be, is it auto? Can I override it? Can I make my house warmer? And it didn't make any sense. And some of the flagship heat pumps that we fit, I think the controls could still be a lot clearer and a lot more easy to get into and to make work. And there are some companies that are coming out with much better ones that just don't give you the option. They just say, well, we'll do it. We'll put it on a nice low curve. And if it's a problem, you can knock it up a little bit. But let's start somewhere nice and efficient. So it does seem a bit unfair, like we're talking about. These are engineers. Even the engineers that are still doing gas and not transitioned yet into doing renewables, they're expected to have so many skills, from lifting floorboards, working at height, hot works in some cases, or pressing, loads and loads and loads of other stuff. They really are a jack of all trades. To then add to them, you also have to learn complex wiring and the theory of controls and weather compensation and flow rates and everything. It does seem a bit unfair, and there's a lot of pressure being put on these guys that have gone into a vocational role, with massive amounts of money being injected by the government, penalties being put into manufacturers, and then all of it hinges on guys that are, normal heating engineers, people like me that have gone through and risen up through doing plumbing and then moving into heating and then maybe moving into renewables. There's a lot of pressure put on them. So the more the manufacturers can do to streamline that, and I think with controls is probably the easiest way. At the moment it comes kind of stock, and you have to go in and change 20, 30 different parameters to get it running.
Why is that, Max? Why are controllers just so awful?
That's a really good question, actually. I'll reach back into the days when I was in the system tech team at Valent when I used to work there, actually. Date myself a little bit here, but the old controller, the VRC 700, I think to a customer, that weather compensating control was about £300. That VRC 700, it was the same control you would use for a boiler as you would for a heat pump, albeit you then need a separate controller called a heat pump interface unit. That VRC 700 would also be the controller for nearly a megawatt cascade of commercial boilers. So the manufacturers are thinking, how can I build this one thing that's going to do everything? And I don't have multiple products to develop, market, look after. And as a result, as Patrick said there, you have 30 odd different parameters just to give the most simple instruction, like, turn on the weather compensation curve. Because in my experience there at Valent, it was one product to do everything. You do have some products out there, I think about maybe a Homely. You wire that into a heat pump and it will talk to the heat pump. It will try and do as much for the homeowner as possible, with the homeowner having a very simple on, off, up, down temperature. That kind of innovation is what heat pumps need. We want to make it as simple for the homeowner as possible, right? And we've already covered how complex installation, commission, everything is. We already know that. But the homeowner just wants something they can turn on, turn up and down, and that's it. Controls are there at the minute to commission heat pumps. They're there to fault find heat pumps, give you feedback. They all have hidden installer menus and things like that. So until this is all simplified, we're stuck with this kind of complex control situation at the moment.
Brendon?
Well, we only really, in majority of installations, expect a heat pump to do two jobs. One is to heat the house and the other is to heat the hot water. That's it. We don't want it to do anything else. My favorite heat pump was the old Danfoss unit. They don't make them anymore, but that unit, you plugged it in and you could walk away. And it just worked. If the customer was cold, they went and pushed the up button. If it was too hot, they went and pushed the down button. The hot water was done automatically, and that was it. If you wanted to cascade it, you put a module in and suddenly the cascade came up. You could do just about anything with that unit, but there were modules that you plugged into it if you wanted to. But the basic unit just worked out the box. And it was brilliant. Unfortunately, people don't seem to learn from experience in that way. They seem to think that complexity makes things better, and that's not my view of it.
Graham, the one thing that I actually picked up on this podcast, which I never fully appreciated up until I actually started doing these, is that the manufacturers, they make the heat pumps, and they are the ones, and I actually think Patrick touched on this in one of the episodes, is that their responsibility is to generate the heat and get it into the house. What happens beyond that point, the manufacturers don't care. Is that part of the problem as to why the controllers are not so great, and why you are getting companies like Adia and Homely and Havenwise coming into the market to try and bridge that gap, which I actually think the manufacturers should be doing, but are they trying to bridge the gap between the actual heat pump and the distribution of the heat inside the house?
You've hit one of the nails very much on the head, which is that you've got to look at it. First off, it is not a heating system. Right? It is a box in the garden made by company X, some pipes made by company Y, and some radiators made by someone else. If you are a brutal and thoroughly unpleasant manufacturer, you take the view, the water comes out the back of my box at 50 degrees, see, my job is finished. The problem is Mrs. Miggins wants the radiators to be 50 degrees too, and it is very unclear whose problem it is. When I used to do tech support, people would ring me because the biggest logo in the system was Samsung. I mean, you've got to give Stelrad their due. They don't write Stelrad on the radiator, otherwise you'd ring them. So they're going to ring me because it's got a big logo on it. And they go, my shower isn't hot. And I go, I made the heat pump, mate. It's not me. So there are, I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe in some countries in Europe, when you buy a heating system, you have to buy every single component from the same people. So, for instance, you might have a Wiesmann. This is why you see things like Wiesmann pumps and Wiesmann valves and so on. You think, why would you buy them? And the reason is that because you've bought it all from Wiesmann, then they are, it's their system. We found in tech that most of our calls were based on problems out in the system. The box was working well. We wanted our customers to come back, so we helped them right the way to the last towel rail. We had no choice. I didn't want to. I didn't make any money out of it, but it worked. But the controls thing, I had a very interesting dinner with a guy from a manufacturer the other day. And the controls thing, there's a deeper problem. And we see this at the moment. I'm going to give you two examples of this. What happens in our industry is somebody develops something, and that somebody in our industry was Daikin, and Daikin wrote a controller back in the midst of time, and every other controller is a copy of that. They just steal the software. I know this, you can see this. So what you do is someone comes up with a mad idea, the next bunch take the same mad idea and build on it. So there is always a build up of this. And you get this inbuilt problem that's been there forever. And then you suddenly go back and say, why do we do this thing? And you go, oh, well, because 20 years ago, someone at Daikin said we should do this thing. I was given the example of how we came up with the size of the coil in cylinders. I couldn't believe this. I only told this 2 days ago. I won't tell you the manufacturer, but they were launching their heat pump a long, long time ago. And they were on stage speaking to all these engineers, and they said, how do you know how big the coil's got to be in the cylinder? And the bloke blurted out, 3 meters squared seems about right. And in our industry, 3 meters squared is what you use. There is no maths behind that. That was a bloke on stage said it. And we all went, yeah, 3 meters, that'll do. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of copy paste all the way through. And it's quite a brave thing for someone in a manufacturer to turn around and go, have we ever considered that all of this control is crap and we'll start again? So it's a huge job. And so you get a lot of this. You know, you look at the units, they all have, every unit has a hybrid function on it. Why? Well, because they've got hybrid functions and we need a hybrid function. Do you? Does anyone use it? No, no one uses it, but they've got one. So they've all got the same functions. They're all copying them. And if you ever are misfortunate enough to go to a factory, I spend my life in factories. When you're wandering around the test rooms, you'll be amazed how many Daikin and Mitsubishi and Vito and so on units, they're all tubed up and running. And you go, lads, what's going on here? They go, well, we're just sort of seeing how it works. So there's a lot of copying, and I got a feeling we've sort of gone down a journey, and maybe the journey's the wrong one.
It's kind of wild to me because the fact that if something goes wrong with your heat pump or with the system and your installer's not picking up the phone, you're going to call your manufacturer, and then they're the ones that are trying to sort out all of your dramas for you kind of remotely. So I would have thought that would have been in the best interests of the manufacturers to try and get the controllers running as best as they can to actually get the systems. And I know that it shouldn't be the system, but to get those systems running as optimally as possible. Why isn't that happening, Brendon?
Because they don't have to. There's nobody making them do it, and it's the easy way out. I'm producing the heat. That's it. It's not my problem. Somebody's got to stand up and actually change. I think the first manufacturer to do that is going to win.
The fact that we're starting, because everything's exploded, right? I've been in heating for half of my life now, and for a long time, it was really stagnated. And I've been working in commercial, in domestic, in renewables, and it was really stagnant for quite a long time because nobody needed to innovate or make any changes. When we're seeing now that lots of people are entering the market that, a few years ago, I'd never heard of a heat pump, didn't know what weather compensation was, but they're seeing that the tide is turning and more people are getting into renewables and that it's going to be something that kind of takes over the industry. So we're seeing lots of people coming in from outside of the industry. So we're seeing fresh blood that aren't tainted by the way that it used to be, which is particularly why the controls company that Graham and I have been working with, they're not coming from a heating background. They're approaching it from a comfort background and from a user experience background, and then asking for us on advice on how to do it. And hopefully we're not telling them things that are part of the old stagnant way. So we're seeing a complete refresh, and we see that not necessarily from a manufacturer point of view for heat pumps, but for third-party controls, for integration, for calculation and survey equipment. There's lots of software and solutions that are coming into the industry that are completely changing it because they're not heating engineers that are learning from heating engineers. Quite often see all of these people coming in because they're seeing it as a sort of cash grab, or they're seeing that this is a big industry to be a part of for the money, whereas we've been doing it for a long time because we really care about the engineering. But it's really necessary, and it's shaking the industry up quite a lot that we're seeing, especially in the last year, of these innovations that are dramatically changing the way we do things and supporting the engineers and designers along the way. So actually, in hindsight, I've probably been a bit unfair about it, and I completely welcome that new, fresh approach.
We can mention them by name, and I think the company you're referring to is Adia. So, Graham, should we be investing in Adia? Because it's only a matter of time before they get swallowed up by one of the big multinational air source heat pump manufacturers?
It's a good question. I stupidly didn't invest in Adia and I haven't got any money left, but I would do. I help them a lot when people are investing. They speak to me. I'm sure they speak to Patrick too and kind of go, what is this firm? What do they do? I think Adia have done something, and a few others, but Adia have done something which is quite interesting, which they've done by mistake. So they are now saying you buy a heat pump and you buy the controls in the house, which means you're buying the radiator and the valve and so on, all at the same time. So I think you will end up, I think you're right. Somebody will buy Adia, let's call it Worcester Bosch just for the sake of it. They will buy them. And then suddenly what will happen is when you want a Worcester Bosch heat pump, it will come with the Worcester Bosch controls, the Worcester Bosch radiators. Then you're buying a system. The only bit you're buying as a plumber yourself is the tubes. And the tubes are the easy bit. So I think that would be a lovely change if you went along to your manufacturer, whoever they are, and said, I want you to design me a system, and a truck turned up with the radiators, the cylinder, the heat pump, the controls, and go, this is all going to work. One phone number, all done. It amazes me that doesn't happen in heating, because in air conditioning, that's always happened since I was a boy. That's how it's done. You don't buy a Daikin indoor unit and a Mitsubishi outdoor unit and hope it works. You buy all Daikin and it works. So I think that will be a big change, and a lot of people are beginning, especially the manufacturers, are beginning to see that, going, I'm not just flogging this 3, 4, 5,000 pound heat pump now. I've got 5,000 quid's worth of radiators and controls as well. And suddenly, these guys are in it for the money, just like we are. So they will specify everything. And I think that will be the big change. And to be honest, can't wait. Bring it on.
It's not not a million miles away from HAS, is it? From a heat as a service, where you take on the responsibility for the comfort levels of the house for the customer as the company that's getting paid a monthly fee or whatever. And it's never really taken off in the UK. I believe it's more popular in Germany and other parts of Europe, where you pay your monthly fee and they make sure that all of the rooms are hot and you're comfortable. If we could put that kind of onus on one centralized company rather than the installer as a coordinator of software and technology and optimization, then one company taking over or taking ownership for all of that would be incredible for the customer.
Max, do you think it's short-sighted that the manufacturers they only care about the box that lives outside, and they don't care what happens beyond that?
I think so. What you see, talk about Adia, we mentioned Homely, Open Energy, all these, there is a market. People want different control for their heat pumps. Installers want to know what's going on, so monitoring, all that sort of piece. You've got some of the more established manufacturers, mainly the air conditioning or the electronics companies. The heating manufacturers are just kind of getting into the market. Baxy's, Ideals, these guys have got new good units, often badged up units coming to market from other companies. So I think it's going to evolve. We're riding on the coattails of the boiler installation piece here, where you chuck it in, you put something on that turns it on, and that's it. You never have to worry about it. Quietly optimistic that we will get there, but yes, I think the short-sightedness is probably a side effect of just getting heat pumps onto the portfolio, and then they'll roll out, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll evolve, and eventually, fingers crossed, get there.
Do you need help understanding your heat pump? Then pick up a copy of From Zero to Heat Pump Hero, an essential guide offering practical advice and basic instructions for new heat pump owners to maximize system efficiency. Available in print and on Kindle, link in the description. Graham, do you think that Octopus have done a good job by driving heat pump adoption?
Yes. So I know it's a bit controversial and people don't like Octopus, but I've always kind of taken a slightly bigger picture. There is no way that Graham Hendra Enterprises is going to install every single heat pump in the UK, right? It's just not, that isn't going to happen. And so what you've got to do is go, Octopus are a very, very slick machine. They know what they're doing. They're not idiots. It doesn't matter what you say. They are not, definitely not idiots. They've got more money than all of us put together. So what I advise people to do is, if you are worried about Octopus, don't work in their space. We recently had a meeting with Octopus and they told us all the houses they don't do. They gave us a great big shopping list of what they don't do. I went, here's a business plan, lads. Let's only do what they don't do. And you go, well, that's only 1.3 million installations a year. And you go, no, that should cover it. Why fight somebody who's bigger than you? Either work with them or work somewhere else away from them. Don't moan about them. They're not going to go away. I'm sure they're not perfect. I don't know that many people at Octopus, but they have their little machine, this Cozy 6 machine, which does a very specific job. Just don't operate in that sector.
I think that's quite easy to do, isn't it? They have to refine, and they don't have enough people on the tools to do a tenth of the amount of interest that they get, which is why they're operating this partnership scheme, aren't they? So they're working with self-employed and small businesses to help deliver that. Again, if you don't want to fight them, you can work with them as well, or like you say, do slightly more complex things or slightly more problematic installs. There should be plenty of work. It certainly seems like we've got to a point where there's a lot more people that want a heat pump than there are installers that can fit them.
It's a really good point there as well. I wrote some, just some reflections before I joined today about what we've seen this year change for me with the likes of Octopus, British Gas, companies like OVO putting in heat pumps. They are becoming mainstream thanks to these companies. And it's not that the market is staying the same size and they're taking a bigger and bigger slice of it. They are making that market bigger. They're making it more acceptable. If you speak to somebody now about a heat pump, chances are they'd have seen something about them somewhere this year. You asked them last year or the year before, like, what? No, don't have a clue what you're talking about. They're necessary to the industry. They are bringing them on board. And if they're doing that through, undercutting people and stuff, so be it. People know heat pumps now, and it's driving that change to heat pumps becoming an acceptable or an accepted technology and a trusted technology as well. And the good thing about Octopus is, you read varying things about the quality of their installations, but they're not going to leave you high and dry. They're a big company. If you go to them and say, I have had an installation from you and I have issues, they will probably go and fix it because they've got a lot riding on heat as well. So it's very good for the industry as a whole. Probably challenging in certain areas where they've encroached on existing turf, if you like, that other installers have had. But like Patrick and Graham have said there's plenty of other areas that you can go and install. It's a growing market, and there's plenty of other installations that Octopus won't touch and various other companies wouldn't do either. So there's plenty of work to go around. It's just being able to find it and find those customers that trust the technology, which thanks to the likes of Octopus, there are more and more of them in the country.
Patrick, we've got the Heat Pump Federation, the Heat Pump Association, and the Ground Source Heat Pump Association. What exactly is their role in the industry?
Fuck knows.
What?
They all put suits on and go and chat to each other in nice rooms with nice music on and nice 3-course dinners.
They're all joining, aren't they? Next year, they're becoming one.
Are they? Well, that's good. One of the things I used to say when I was a cynical teenager is that all of these charities that pop up and are not for profit, but have got lots of directors that are still making quite a lot of money, if they all join together, they're still trying to help the same people, and there'd be a lot of more money going around to help them. And now I'm just a cynical 42-year-old instead, and I still feel the same way. Trade associations and bodies and lobbyists, it's all a bit yuck, isn't it? I see all of that as kind of a bit more of an extension of red tape and stuff that's getting in the way of engineers doing a good job. Just don't really see the point.
They're supposed to lobby. So, I mean, one of the things you can see at the moment is, and I often ask this, don't moan about our industry. How much money did you or your company put into lobby government? I can tell you, Graham Hendra Enterprises put in a grand sum of £0 this year. If you look at what's just happened to the new MCS standard, that was written by someone who sells boilers. It is absolutely clear that was written by a boiler guy. And bless them, the boiler people are very, very good at putting money up and getting things done. That's how the world works. Sorry if that's news, but you pay your money, you get what you want. Our industry puts in nothing. We've got all these fractured, heat pump association, ground source heat pump association, all trying to do the same thing. And you go, so the total push from heat pumps is bugger all. If they all went together and actually came round tapping on the doors of all of us, let's be honest, there's no one on this call who hasn't got enough money, who couldn't put a few quid in, and come and ask us and go, come on, we want to do this message, we want to go this direction, but I'm afraid you guys have got to come up with a couple of grand a piece, all of you. And we'd all go, okay, if that's the message we want to do, let's do it. But at the moment, you can't get a seat with the appropriate people because we just don't pay the right lobbyists.
Brendon, 2025, what's the ideal vision for heat pumps?
If the industry does start coming together, that would be a start. I've always equated our industry to a classroom of kindergarten children. Me. When the government, as was Graham said, they look at the government and they see one body. They see one person representing the gas side, basically, and they've got 120,000 members. They talk with one voice. We don't. We need to come together and actually talk with one voice, and that's got to come through to the training side, the regulatory side, the whole lot. We need to actually start bringing this industry together.
2025, for me, it just needs to become mainstream. We need to be pushing for things like planning to just become simple, the regulation, the red tape. It just needs to become simple so a consumer thinks, I've got an issue with my heating system, boiler or heat pump, they're on a level playing field, and I'll just pick the one that makes the most sense to me. Much in the way that the EV industry became normal. If you're looking at a car nowadays, chances are EV is definitely in the consideration. It became normal in a very short space of time. 2025 for me should be the year of normalization of heat pumps. We get rid of the negative press. That's all gone away. We're starting to see that come on board now. Funnily enough, just at a time where all the big boiler manufacturers are starting to offer heat pumps, all the bad press is going away. Take from that what you will. Hopefully with that now, it just becomes normalised. Clean heat market mechanism, all this sort of stuff. You start to see them advertised in the same space, talked about in the same way. For me, normalisation is 2025.
Same question to you, Patrick. And also, do you think that the spark gap needs to get narrowed in order for heat pumps to become that little bit more attractive?
We'd care a lot less about the efficiency of a heat pump if electricity was half the price, wouldn't we? Gas has had an easy ride for a very long time, but that's difficult to do unless we prolifically increase the amount of homegrown energy that we're getting from solar or wind or nuclear or something. In 2025, I guess a lot of the things that we've been looking forward to for the last couple of years seem like they're coming into fruition. We've got better training from ground level, so we've got the first proper low carbon apprenticeship that started at the end of this year, which we're lucky to have an apprentice in at the moment. I think that's going to make a bigger difference over the next few years. It's not quick, obviously. Clean heat market mechanism, although it's watered down, it's definitely something that's bringing it to the forefront of people's minds, so it'd be a bit of a catalyst. And I think we're going to see a lot more green incentives from market-led sources, so mortgages and loan providers of some kind to help embody it. I'd love to see the new government now put in a little bit more carrot than stick. So in Scotland, you get the bus grant. You can also get a low interest or zero interest, I don't know, £7,500 loan to pay for the extra bit of the system. That seems like something that would make a massive difference. Clean heat market mechanism being the stick, if we can add a carrot at the same time, I think we'd see a dramatic uptake of interest. So I think it's all coming together. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about and looking forward to for a while, I think is just going to get over the hill in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Final words to you, Graham?
Well, what's going to happen in 2025? I agree with everything that everyone said, and I think it would be lovely, but I reckon that we'll be sitting here in a year going, aren't we brilliant? We did 76,000 installations this year. All the same. No, I think the big change next year, it will probably be that the boiler lads are going to push us into hybrid. We talked about hybrid a couple of weeks ago, just before the announcement, brilliantly. So everything we said was out of date 10 minutes later. It's obvious that's where they want us to go. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. For you, the one-man band, small installer, hybrid's kind of nice. You know, you turn up, you stick it on the wall. It's still got the badly running gas boiler, but you've got this in. So I think that will happen. I think one other thing, so I always say I live inside the machine, and my plan for 2025 is to completely forget about everything after the heat pump and only work on the bit in the tin. The biggest thing I've seen this year is you can now adjust what's called the Delta T. It's on your t-shirt. What that means is we can slow the water down. I know that's really geeky, but if we can slow the water down, then we can start using old pipe work and so on. Yeah, we run the water very, very quickly through heat pumps. Why do we do that? Because that's what Daikin said we should have done in 2008, and they're now questioning it. So I've seen units now where you can actually go in and run the water much, much slower through the system. So it then just makes everything easier for the installer, because those old pipes are usable, and so or a lot more than today. So hopefully that comes in a big way. I hope it goes really well, but it is a bit depressing that we're still talking like we were talking all those eons ago. I know Brendon was doing this in the 1940s, but those of us who've only been here since the 2010s, it's not changing quick enough. But yeah, hopefully new controls, and just everything sounds like it's just getting a little bit easier than it was.
Just to encourage you, Graham, I don't know if you know the new Daikin Delta T for radiators is 10 degrees.
Nice. Good.
That's the set standard. You can't change it.
Which is a move in the right direction. Just makes life easier.
Have you got questions about heat pumps and renewables? Then head over to the forums at Renewable Heating Hub for practical advice from thousands of fellow homeowners and heat pump users. So that's it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Homeowners Q&A. A huge thank you to Patrick, Max, Brendon and Graham for their invaluable insights. Your expertise and enthusiasm continues to make these conversations engaging and impactful. And to our listeners, thank you for your ongoing support. We hope today's episode has provided useful takeaways and inspiration as you navigate the world of renewable heating. Until next time, stay warm, stay green, and stay tuned for more Homeowners Q&A. Goodbye.